with Anthony Gardner. He's a former US ambassador to the EU under President Barack Obama. Ambassador Gardner, good to have you with us today. Thanks for being with us.
Good to be on the program. Happy Easter to you and to all of your listeners.
Thank you, Anthony, and to you and yours. Let's talk about what's been happening over the weekend. Have you seen it as a weekend of great progress or one that's been stymied?
It's going to take a long time. I'm not surprised at all. You know, the president said he would sort out the invasion and the conflict in Ukraine within a matter of hours, and it was 100 days, and now those days are almost over. It's an incredibly complicated situation. But the minerals deal appears to be making some progress. This is the deal between the United States and Ukraine. The first draft that was tabled, which I read, was incredibly one-sided. Ukraine couldn't possibly have accepted that for a lot of reasons. But apparently there's a new draft, and it looks like the heads of terms have been signed and something more definitive will be signed. Now, that's important because that will give the United States and Trump personally a stake in the future of an independent, sovereign, stable, perhaps even prosperous Ukraine. So that's a step forward. Now, settling the main issues around this conflict will be much harder, partly because, as we saw in the Oval Office meeting with Zelensky, the president really has seemed to have adopted and accepted Putin's narrative about this conflict. In fact, said that Ukraine started the conflict. The last point here is really security guarantees, which have always been and remain the key issue. Zelensky will have to get something in return for a deal, and will need to see more clarity from the European countries, of which the UK is one, in terms of what they are willing to do in terms of a reassurance force on the ground. And I say that because in 1994, just to remind your listeners, there was a Budapest memorandum that was signed, according to which the frontiers of Ukraine were recognized. Ukraine was recognized as a sovereign country within its existing borders. They gave up the nuclear weapons, and those guarantees turned out to be worthless. So they don't want to repeat that mistake again. The UK signed it, the US signed it, and Russia signed it. So, no, I think I was in the middle of the Budapest Accords, 1994, which is an important document. It's not always discussed as it should be. They're important because the UK, Russia, and the United States, in that memorandum, 1984, recognized Ukraine within its existing borders. And Ukraine gave up its nuclear weapons in return for that. Those guarantees have turned out to be pretty much worthless, obviously because of the 2014 invasion and the more recent invasion. So Zelensky's not going to want to repeat that mistake again. He actually has to see serious security guarantees, including by several European states, including the UK. What are they willing to do in terms of a military force on the ground?
What about the talk of ceasefire and 30-hour cessations and that sort of talk coming from Moscow and the answers from Ukraine also? Anthony, are you buying into this, or do you think it's a ploy? Is it, as has been suggested, Putin trying to play Trump and curry favor there?
Well, there's no indication that ceasefire is holding. I mean, it's been broken almost immediately. I don't think we should take Putin at his word at all. I mean, he's repeatedly lied about his intentions every step of the way. So no, I don't put any store by that at all.
Yeah, and does it concern you how much store the current president does put by Putin's word?
It's extremely concerning. As I was saying at the beginning of our remarks, we saw it in the Oval Office meeting with Zelensky is really quite extraordinary. I mean, especially what J.D. Vance was saying, that it was Ukraine that started this war, which is, of course, absurd, and that there seems to be openness for a discussion that looks at many of Putin's other concerns, not just about Ukraine, but about NATO and about Europe as well. Which really seem to give credence to a wide range of Russian narratives. So I am very concerned.
I mean, you were a former U.S. ambassador to the EU and under President Obama. It must be like looking at a different planet.
It is. Look, I was very frustrated, to be clear, with our inability in 2014 to respond more quickly and more effectively to the Russian invasion. Particularly in the first 6 months. For those who have forgotten, I'll just remind your listeners, it took us really 6 to 7 months, and that's before the downing of the Malaysian aircraft in July 2014, to really do anything that was significant. By significant, I mean economic sanctions. We took 6 months to apply travel bans and asset freezes, which were really not particularly effective. We did move on to more significant things, but really much too slowly. Having said that, people do forget it's incredibly hard to manage a coalition, not only of, at that time, 28, now 27 European member states, EU member states, but even more broadly, Canada, Japan, South Korea, Swiss, and so forth. Really, really tough. And this is what the Russians have been playing with. They never believed that the Western alliance really could move quickly. And we still have a system, by the way, in Europe, of course, of 6 monthly sanctions which have to be rolled over. And it's not clear whether now the EU will again roll over its sanctions, because there's one member state, Hungary, that is threatening to terminate them. So it's been really tough. I do think, however, that experience in 2014 served as important muscle memory for the more recent sanctions, which have been far more effective and far broader.
Not to get into too much of the past, but is there times you think to yourself, Anthony, that you wished President Obama might have been a bit more robust in his response to Putin's incursions towards Ukraine and thereabouts at that time?
Absolutely, yes. There were many of us who thought that. And by the way, President Biden, then Vice President Biden, was one of those who thought really more clearly about the need to act faster and more robustly. And they argued it. And while I was at the EU, my job was really focused on getting a coalition of the EU to cooperate with us. But there were many others who were pushing for more faster. But it wasn't possible at the time politically. I mean, people do forget that. We did manage one important thing then. This is an important point. We managed to keep our alliance solid and unified. The Russians were trying to divide us at that point, and they failed to split us. But certainly we could have done more.
Yeah. And as the link dropping in slightly there as you're talking, but I'm just talking over it just a little bit just to ask you about what more you could have done, do you think, in retrospect?
We could have moved more quickly to the economic sanctions I mentioned before, hitting oil and gas and financial services. We did some of it after the 6-month initial period, but we could have done more quickly, for sure, particularly to hit the sources of revenue for the Russian state, including Gazprom. We didn't touch the SWIFT financial messaging system back then. We did it more recently. We could have looked at it. It was considered to be a nuclear bomb, which we didn't want to use. But there are a whole host of things like that to address the sources of Russian state power.
When you look at President Trump's comments the other day about we'll take a pass, and echoed by the Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and they said we'll take a pass if this doesn't come to pass in terms of negotiations and peace and so forth. Anthony, does that sort of language worry you? I mean, you would imagine the Ukrainian people are pretty concerned when they hear stuff like that.
Yes, I am concerned, first of all, because this is not something that can be sorted out in a day, a week, or several months. It's a highly complex situation. So the idea that you could suddenly arrive in the Oval Office and just, knock heads together to get a deal right away is naive. Secondly, I'm concerned because this conflict really is of great importance to all of us in Europe and the United States, not just because of the values that are at stake, recognition of boundaries, international law, but if we fail to stand up for an independent, sovereign Ukraine, then I would be very pessimistic about the future of many other countries in Europe. And I'm not the only one to say that. The Balts are concerned, the Poles are concerned, but even writ large, Europe should be concerned, because Putin will not give up after he's taken the several chunks out of Ukraine. And I think he's playing for a much bigger game here. He said repeatedly, by the way, that an independent, sovereign, democratic Ukraine is a mortal threat to Russia itself, because it would serve as an example to the Russian people of what they could aspire to. So I don't think he actually wants to accept the existence of Ukraine, which he has said is a fiction. It's never been an independent state, doesn't deserve to exist. In fact, he's even denied the existence of Ukrainian language and Ukrainians, independent culture, which of course are absurd. So a lot is at stake here, and we need to take it seriously.
Yeah, to say the least. Anthony, thank you for your time today. That was Anthony Gardner, their former US ambassador to the EU. Let us know what you think